Today, I want to show you how to create this double exposure in GIMP. If you're ready, let's do it. The first thing we're going to do is create a new document. Here are the dimensions: 4,000 for the width, 2250 for the height, and then under the advanced options, we're going to fill with the foreground color, which is this color right here. So click on your foreground color swatch here to get your change foreground color and type in this hexadecimal right here. Go ahead and click OK to create your new document. Now we have 3 images for this double exposure, and you can find the images via the links in the description below. So go ahead and download those images, find them, select all of them, click and drag them over your document, and they'll be added as new layers in GIMP. Pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and turn off this layer and this layer. We're going to rename this Original. Let's call this one Mountains, and this one will be Clouds. Make sure Original is selected. Grab your Move tool with the letter M, and let's move our model over here to the bottom right. So right about there should be good. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to make a selection of our model so we can remove the background. Now, the best tool for the job is our foreground select tool, which you can find right here. I'm going to go ahead and increase this interface here. All right, so there's a couple of steps for using the foreground select tool. And I'm not going to go into great detail because I have another tutorial that shows you how to use all the different options for the foreground selection tool, which you can find in the description below. I'll have a link in there for you. So for those of you that don't know how to use it, the first step you have to take is make an initial outline around your model or your subject. And it doesn't have to be perfect because in step 2, we're going to further refine the area that needs to be selected. Now we have some stray hairs here that I do not want included in the selection. So I'm going to go ahead and get in real close to her neck there to eliminate that as part of the selection. So I'm going to continue going all the way around and then go back to the beginning. Once you see that little yellow circle, release your mouse button, click Enter or Return, and you'll be entered into step 2, which includes automatically selecting your brush and applying this blue overlay. Now you can see the area of the outline that we created is a lighter shade of blue. What we need to do now is paint on the inside of our model, again creating an outline, and that's going to remove the overlay, which is going to help GIMP decide on the colors and the contrast and the textures to include in your selection. So I'm going to go ahead and go around the model like so. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Once you get back to the beginning, go ahead and release your mouse button, and then that layer mask is removed, or I should say that color overlay is removed. I'm going to go with a larger brush now so I can paint on the inside and remove the overlay from this area as well. I just want to give GIMP some more colors to consider for the selection process. Let's go ahead and hit Enter or Return. GIMP is going to do its calculation based on the information and the colors that you gave it, and it's going to fine-tune that overlay to the edges of our model. Let's go ahead and click Enter or Return to make our selection. We're going to come over here and click on this little clown icon to add a layer mask via a selection. Go ahead and click Add, and boom, your background is gone. How cool is that? I love it. Now, I love using layer masks in this way because maybe GIMP didn't do a perfect job in our selection process. We can actually use the layer mask to add or remove the pixels as needed. But as you can see, GIMP did a pretty good job. Let's say it didn't. Let's say these stray hairs right here are too much, or we want to remove them or reduce them because we don't want them included in our image. Let's go ahead and deselect with Command or Control, Shift plus A. Now, with our layer mask selected, what we can do is grab our paintbrush tool and paint with black or white to add or remove the pixels as needed. Now, we're not actually removing those pixels permanently. We're actually hiding the pixels temporarily, and then we can re-show them if we made a mistake. So if I zoom in here, we can actually see part of her neck is kind of transparent, more so than in other areas. So we didn't do a very good job in the selection process here, but that's okay. Let's grab our paintbrush tool and come over here, click right here to change your foreground color to black, and then we can hide those pixels that we don't want included in that layer. Now, if I switch my foreground color to white by clicking on these arrows or pressing the letter X, I can then come in here and paint back the pixels or re-show those pixels that were hidden before. So if I come over here and begin painting, it's going to begin adding that background back in, but press the letter X to switch to black, and you can remove or hide those pixels, I should say, so they're not included. Okay, let's zoom all the way back out with Command or Control, Shift plus J. Now, the other thing I want to mention is I have another tutorial that will show you 7 different ways to remove a background in GIMP. Make sure you check out that tutorial. It's in the description below as well. Let's go ahead and go up to Layer now and increase the boundary size of the layer, which is restricted by this green outline right here. Click on Layer to Image Size to increase that to the canvas size, which is going to give us more freedom and control over this layer instead of being restricted to the inside of that layer boundary. Now, what I want to do next is I want to duplicate this layer. I'm going to turn off the original, and I'm going to call this one black and white because we're going to convert this to black and white by desaturating the layer. But first, you need to make sure you have your image layer selected. If you take a look at your layer mask here, I just clicked on it again. You can see this white outline right here. That means the layer mask is selected. Any edits that we apply to it are not going to be applied to this image layer or these pixels here. So these are the pixels. These are showing or hiding the pixels. All right, let's go up to Colors, Desaturate, and click on Desaturate to, well, desaturate the image. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to increase the contrast a little bit because our model is a little bit flat. The lighting is a little flat. So what we can do is we can darken the shadows and brighten the highlights, and that's going to add contrast. So we're going to go up to Colors and select Curves. And we have our shadows over here on the left. I'm going to go ahead and move this over. And if we click on our linear line here and drag down, that makes the shadows darker. That's too much. So let's go back up. And over here we have our highlights. So that makes the highlights brighter. So we want a little S-curve, which gives us the contrast that we need. All right, let's turn our mountains back on. And we're actually going to go ahead and move that all the way up to the top. We're going to resize the mountains, and we're going to place the sun on our eyes. So it looks like the rays are coming out of our eyes. Kind of hard to do right now because we can't see our model below the mountains. So what we're going to do is drop the opacity of the mountains. We're going to grab our scale tool, which is right here. We're going to click on this layer, and we're going to click on the side here and drag it to the left all the way to the edge right there. Now we have a white square right here in the center. If you hover over it, it turns yellow. Once it's yellow, you can then click on the inside and move it into position. So I'm going to place it right about there. Should be good. Click Enter or Return to resize and move the layer. Okay, let's put this back to 100. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to take our mountains and place it inside of our model. So we're going to right click on our black and white layer and select Mask to Selection, and that creates a selection around our model. Make sure your mountains layer is selected. We're going to create a new layer mask via a selection again. Click Add, and boom, our mountains are now inside our model. All right, let's deselect with Command or Control, Shift plus A. All right, now the fun begins because we're going to now begin painting on our layer masks to control the visibility of the pixels of the mountain. So we're going to hide the mountain in certain areas, and we're going to show the mountain in other areas. So the first thing I want to do is grab my brush with the letter P, and then in the tool options, I want to bring my hardness here from 50, which is the default, all the way down to 0. That's going to create a very, very soft edge brush, but I think it works great for this particular project. Now, make sure you have black selected for your foreground color. Let's create a very large brush. And then when you paint in that area that you want to remove, it's going to begin hiding those pixels of the mountain and revealing our model below. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the mountain all the way up here and the sky. I'm going to go with a smaller brush because I don't want to remove these peaks in the mountain. I just want to bring back our model in that area. All right, so the next thing I want to do is a little tricky, because what I want to do is I want to remove the mountains, but I want to keep the sun rays. And we can do that. We can paint with black in here, but I don't think it looks really good, does it? I'm going to undo that with Command or Control plus Z. So instead, here's a pro tip. We're going to paint with an opacity of around 40 to 50. So this is the opacity of your brush. Now, instead of removing or hiding the pixels completely, it's only going to lower the opacity of it down to this level. So it's going to show the pixels at a lighter value. Now I can paint inside of the rays here and remove the mountains and keep the rays at the same time. I'm going to go with a smaller brush now and do this side here. Now the thing is, this is not going to be perfect from the get-go, and that's because as we continue adding or stacking more layers as we work on this project, it's going to alter how this layer looks. So you may need to come back at a later time and adjust the layer mask so it looks the way you want it to. I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity down even more. I'm going to go with the lower brush, and I'm going to paint in this area just to blend it in a little bit more. Now I can go back and paint with white by switching the foreground color to white. And then I can paint in the rays in case I remove them too much. So again, I'm just using a smaller amount of opacity to slowly paint those rays back in. And then of course you can paint with black again until you get the results you want. Now you can continue going back and forth till eternity, and that's why I don't recommend trying to get this perfect right now until you have the other layers stacked accordingly. So let's go ahead and move on by adding the mountains to this side of the canvas. Let's go up to Layer and select Layer to Image Size to change that layer boundary size. And we're going to paint with white. So switch to white, increase the opacity, and then just paint along the edge right here. So I just want to remove the outline of our model pretty much. So something like that. Now what I want to do is I want to lower that opacity again and continue painting the mountain back in at a smaller amount. So basically we're fading the mountain back in from lighter to darker. Now we can go with the lower opacity again, continue adding some mountains back in, whatever works for you. Now I have a hard edged here because that was the end of the image originally. So now we can paint with black to begin removing that. I'm gonna go ahead and increase the opacity though, so I can get rid of that a little bit quicker. I also want to remove the sky and some of this area here. Okay, back to a lower opacity and a large brush. So I can begin painting in this area here because there's kind of an edge here between the different opacity levels that I used. Now, she is starting to show through. We can see her shoulder here and her hair here that we need to remove. So we're going to go back to white to paint out that area or areas. I don't want her shoulder in this. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I'm going to use a large brush here so I can paint that in, or remove the hair I should say, like so, and painting from left to right to blend it all in. All right, we now need to remove the sky, and we can do that with our brush when we paint with black, of course. But another way to do it is to make a selection of your sky. So I'm going to use my fuzzy select tool to make a selection, but first make sure your mountain image layer is selected. Click in the sky area and drag down. Now I have a pink overlay because I have my draw mask turned on in the tool options. Now I have another tutorial that goes into great detail on how to use the fuzzy select tool to remove your backgrounds in this manner. So make sure you check that out. The link is in the description below. So I'm going to continue dragging this down until I have everything selected that I need selected. And then we need to make sure our layer mask is selected. Our background color is set to black, and then hit your delete key to remove the background. Okay, Control-Shift-A to deselect. So the next thing I want to do is I want to lower the saturation of this layer. And I don't want it completely black and white. I want a little color. So that's why I'm desaturating a little. but I also want to work non-destructively in case I change my mind later on. So I'm going to do that by duplicating this layer, right-clicking on it, and applying the layer mask. And then under colors, we can go ahead and desaturate again. Now, to bring some of that color back, all we have to do is adjust the opacity. And this gives you the flexibility to change your mind later on versus applying that desaturation directly on that layer. All right, let's work on our clouds now. Let's go ahead and turn that layer on, click and drag it all the way up to the top. Let's grab our scale tool because we need to make those clouds larger. I'm going to grab each side here and make them larger. We also need to lower that opacity so we can see what's going on underneath. I want the clouds to look like they're coming out of our head. So I'm going to go ahead and move these clouds into position. And I think that size is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit enter or return. And we have a good start. Now we need to remove these clouds down here and the blue part of the sky. So I'm going to grab my fuzzy select tool and I'm going to click and drag down to get the selection that I want. Now it's not going to select everything that I want to remove. It's not going to select this down here, but that's fine. We'll get to that in just a second. I have a little piece right here that I want to add, so I'm going to hold down my shift key and click right there. All right, let's add a layer mask. We're going to click right here again, make sure you have selection, and we want to make sure we have invert mask turned on. So make sure you do that and click add to remove that blue part of the sky. Let's deselect, and then with our brush tool, we're going to make a very large brush. We're going to make sure our opacity is at 100, and then we can remove this area fairly quickly. Okay, I'm going to go with a smaller brush now because I want to remove the clouds in front of the mountain and on her face, and I don't necessarily need all the clouds anyways. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue removing clouds until I'm happy with the final look. All right, so at this point, you're probably saying that looks horrible, and you're right. So we have a couple more steps to blend in this layer with the others. The first thing I want to do is I want to desaturate the layers, but we can't do that until we have that image layer selected here. So now that the pixels are selected, we can go ahead and desaturate. All right, so that helped, but check this out. We're going to go up to mode and change it to overlay, and boom. Oh, that looks so much better. Wouldn't you agree? All right, so the other thing I'm not liking right now is her head right here. We need to blend that in with the clouds so the clouds look like they're coming out of her head. So we're going to go ahead and grab our brush tool and paint with black. And we want to make sure that the opacity is set to a lower amount. And we need to make sure we have the correct layer mask selected, which is our model here. And then I can begin painting over that area to remove her hair and to show those clouds a little bit more. So each time you paint over that area, it's going to bring that opacity of that layer mask lower and lower, and then the clouds will show through more every time you make a new pass. Now you have to release your mouse button to continue applying another level of opacity or transparency. Now I think I have some of the sky of the mountain here again, so this is why going back and forth on your layer mask is going to be needed, because you're not, like I said, you're not going to get it perfect the first time through, and you're going to have to go back and make adjustments to it to get the final edit that you want for your project. You can always turn off your layers here to see if maybe it's something else, and it's this layer here that's actually causing the problems now. So I'm going to go ahead and put on a white layer mask. Make sure you have invert mask turned off, and then I can paint away in that area to get rid of that part of the mountain. All right, one more step to make this image look even better, and that's to colorize our model. So in my initial project here, I colorized her a little bit to bring back a little color. She looks good in black and white, but I think she looks better in color. Not a lot of color, just a little. So let me show you how I did that. And we're going to grab our original layer. We're going to duplicate it, click, drag it all the way up to the top, turn it on. We're going to go ahead and right click and select Apply Layer Mask. Then we're going to drop the opacity down to around 50, and we're going to change the mode to, let's do Overlay. Pretty cool. All right, one more thing. We need to add our white layer mask again, so we can paint with black to remove her from this part of the image. How cool is that? I Love it. All right, I hope you enjoyed this double exposure GIMP special effects tutorial. For more special effect tutorials, check out that playlist right there.